$10,000. Cash only. That's my fee for putting your name forward. Lori sipped her coffee, watching me over the rim of her mug. Think of it as an investment in your future. The words hung between us in the sticky air of Daisy's Diner, a place 3 blocks from our office building that Lori had specifically chosen because none of our colleagues ever ate here. The vinyl booth squeaked beneath me as I shifted my weight, certain I had misheard her. I'm sorry. What? $10,000, she repeated, setting her mug down with a soft clink. That's what it costs to get your application in front of the board. Her tone was casual, as if discussing the weather or weekend plans, not career extortion. I stared at her, this woman who had been my direct supervisor for 2 years. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed softly, casting unflattering shadows across her face. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That's illegal, I finally managed, my voice barely audible above the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Lori laughed, a short, dismissive sound. It's business, Melanie. You're paying for access, not the guarantee of promotion. The meeting with the board is where decisions happen. Without my recommendation, there is no meeting. She dabbed the corner of her mouth with a paper napkin. Consider how much this position would boost your salary. 60% increase at minimum. This is just expediting the process. Before we continue further, thank you for clicking on this video. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below while I tell you how $10,000 nearly destroyed my career, but ended up saving it instead. My name is Melanie Winters, and 6 years ago, I landed an entry-level position at one of the largest financial analysis firms in Boston. I started as a junior analyst, working 60-hour weeks, volunteering for projects nobody wanted, and slowly building a reputation for solving problems others couldn't. By my 4th year, I'd been promoted twice and saved the company millions through process improvements I'd designed. When Pascal, our department head, announced his retirement, everyone, including me, assumed I'd be next in line. My performance reviews were stellar. Clients requested me specifically for their accounts. I had trained half the department on systems I helped develop. There was just one obstacle: Lori Barrett. Lori became my supervisor after a company restructuring 2 years ago. She was brought in from an industry competitor with impressive credentials and immediately established herself as someone who took credit for departmental successes while distributing blame downward. Any achievement under her supervision somehow became her idea in management meetings. Any failure belonged entirely to her team members. I learned to document everything, every email, every suggestion, every improvement. It didn't help much, but it kept me sane. The head position would finally free me from working under her. It represented not just a significant pay raise, but escape and validation that my work mattered. I don't have that kind of money, I said truthfully, watching a waitress refill coffee mugs at a nearby table. Lori's perfectly plucked eyebrows arched slightly. Second mortgage? Personal loan? I'm sure you can get creative. She checked her watch, a designer piece that probably cost more than my monthly rent. You have 48 hours to decide, or I recommend Ethan instead. Ethan. The thought of him getting the position made my stomach turn. He'd been with the company 8 months and spent most of that time building political alliances rather than doing actual work. Why are you doing this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Lori's smile tightened. Because I can. She gathered her purse, sliding out of the booth. Thursday, noon, same place. I expect an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. My apartment felt too small, the walls closing in as I paced from room to room. The promotion would increase my salary enough to finally start tackling my student loans in earnest. I'd been planning to help my younger sister with her college tuition next year. Lori had calculated everything perfectly. She knew about my financial situation. I'd mentioned my loans during a team-building exercise months ago. She knew I'd been passed over for advancement at my previous job despite promises from management. She knew exactly how much this opportunity meant to me. I sat on my small balcony until 3 in the morning, watching the city lights and considering my options. I could report her, but it would be her word against mine. I could refuse to pay, but then Ethan would get the position, and I'd be stuck under Lori's supervision indefinitely. I could try to gather the money, but even if I emptied my emergency savings and maxed out my credit cards, I'd still fall short. The next day at work was torture. Lori acted completely normal, stopping by my desk to ask about client reports and deadlines, as if she hadn't just demanded a bribe. I smiled and responded professionally, while my mind raced through scenarios and possibilities. During lunch break, I withdrew $200 from my emergency fund, all I could spare, and bought a small digital voice recorder from an electronics store down the street. Not the latest model, just something basic that worked. When I returned to the office, I found an email from Lori requesting projected figures for the next quarter. I spent hours compiling the data, triple-checking everything. If there was even a small error, she would use it against me. That evening, I rehearsed what I would say in front of my bathroom mirror, how I would get her to repeat her demand clearly, how I would respond. I practiced keeping my face neutral, my voice calm. Wednesday crawled by. I took the recorder home, tested it multiple times, and practiced hiding it in different pockets to find the best audio quality. I chose my outfit for Thursday carefully, a blazer with a deep inner pocket where the recorder would be concealed but unobstructed. I barely slept Wednesday night. By the time I arrived at Daisy's diner on Thursday, my hands were trembling slightly. I tucked them under the table as Lori slid into the booth across from me. "So," she said without preamble, "have you made your decision?" I needed more from her. More explicit statements. More evidence. "I need more time to get the money together," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Lori's mouth tightened. "Time isn't something I can give you. The board meets next week. Can you at least confirm exactly what I'm paying for?" I asked, heart pounding so loudly I worried she might hear it. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You're paying for my endorsement to the selection committee. 10,000 guarantees your application reaches the board. Nothing more. And if I refuse?" Her smile was thin and predatory. "Then you'll remain exactly where you are, under my supervision, forever." I nodded slowly, pretending to consider my options. "I'll have your money tomorrow." Relief flickered across her face. She thought she'd won. Smart choice. Cash only, like I said. Small bills. Meet me here. Same time. As she left, confident in her victory, something hardened inside me. I wouldn't be bringing her money tomorrow. I had something else planned entirely. Instead of gathering cash that evening, I made a single phone call to the company's ethics hotline. Anonymous. Detailed. With a timestamp of when they could expect evidence to arrive via email. Then I went home, connected the recorder to my laptop, and listened to our conversation. Her demands were clear, explicit, undeniable. I sent the audio file through a temporary email address to the ethics department with a simple message. "Lori Barrett is selling promotions." The next morning, I arrived at work early, completed my assignments, brought Lori coffee the way she liked it, medium roast, splash of almond milk, no sugar. She accepted it with a knowing smile, assuming I was already trying to curry favor. "Looking forward to our meeting later," she said. "Absolutely," I replied. "I'll see you at noon." I never showed up at Daisy's that day. Instead, I sat at my desk, methodically working through financial models while my future hung in the balance. At 12:15, my phone buzzed with a text from Lori. "Where are you?" I didn't reply. At 12:32, she returned to the office, face flushed with anger. She marched directly to my cubicle and leaned down, her voice a hostile whisper. "What are you playing at?" I looked up calmly, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "I had a client call that couldn't wait. I sent you an email." "I didn't receive any email," she snapped. "That's strange. I'll forward it again." I turned back to my computer, dismissing her. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt enormous. Lori hovered for a moment, then stalked away to her office, closing the door with controlled precision. Through the glass walls, I watched her pick up her phone, typing furiously. Moments later, my phone buzzed again. "Today, 5 p.m., my office. Don't disappoint me again." During the next few hours, I acted completely normal, completed projects, responded to emails, even helped Ethan troubleshoot an analysis that had gone sideways. Not once did I let my expression reveal the knot of anxiety in my stomach. At 4:58, I knocked on Lori's door. "Close it," she commanded, without looking up from her computer. I did as instructed, then took a seat across from her desk. The recorder was in my pocket again, just in case. "I don't appreciate being stood up," she said, finally raising her gaze to mine. "Particularly not when we have an arrangement." "I told you, I had a client call. Did you bring what we discussed?" I hesitated, then shook my head. I can't do it, Lori. Her expression hardened. Can't or won't? Both. I sat straighter. I won't pay you to do your job, and even if I wanted to, I can't access that kind of money. Lori's laugh held no humor. Then, I guess our business is concluded. She turned back to her computer. I'll be submitting Ethan's name to the committee tomorrow morning. You can go. I didn't move. You know I deserve that position. Deserve? She looked up, genuinely amused. Nobody deserves anything in this world, Melanie. You take what you can get. You play the game, and clearly, you don't know how to play. The confidence in her voice made me second-guess my plan for a moment. Was I making a terrible mistake? Would anyone even believe me? Is there anything else? She asked impatiently. I stood slowly. No, nothing else. That evening, I received an email notification for a meeting the following Tuesday. The board review for the department head position. I was not included on the invitation. Ethan's name was the only one listed as a candidate. The weekend passed in a blur of doubt and anxiety. Had I miscalculated? Would the ethics department even act on my report? Or would it be buried like so many workplace complaints? By Sunday night, I was seriously considering calling in sick on Monday, but I didn't. I arrived early, as always, made coffee in the break room, prepared for my client meetings, pretended everything was normal. At 10:17 a.m. on Monday, my desk phone rang, an extension I didn't recognize. Melanie Winters speaking. Miss Winters, this is Diane from HR. Could you come to conference room B immediately? My mouth went dry. May I ask what this is regarding? It will be explained when you arrive. Please bring nothing with you. The walk to conference room B felt like the longest journey of my life. Was I being fired? Had Lori somehow turned this around on me? When I opened the door, 3 people were waiting. Diane from HR, a gray-haired man I recognized as Gregory Young, the company's legal counsel, and a woman I'd never seen before, who introduced herself as Isabel Chen from the ethics committee. Please, sit down, Diane said, gesturing to an empty chair. We have some questions about a report that was submitted to the ethics hotline. For the next hour, they asked me detailed questions about my interactions with Lori. They listened to the recording twice. They took extensive notes. Not once did they indicate whether they believed me or what actions might follow. What happens now? I asked when they seemed finished. Gregory exchanged glances with Isabel. We're still investigating. In the meantime, please continue with your normal duties, and don't discuss this matter with anyone, including Lori, especially Lori, Isabel emphasized. Act as you normally would. I returned to my desk feeling both relieved and more anxious than before. Lori was in a client meeting, so I didn't have to face her immediately. When she eventually returned, she barely acknowledged me. The next day, Tuesday, the board was scheduled to meet at 1:30 p.m. to review candidates for the department head position. By 1:15, Ethan was pacing nervously by the elevators, straightening his tie repeatedly. Lori emerged from her office looking polished and confident. She said something quietly to Ethan that made him nod vigorously. I pretended to focus on my computer screen, but watched from the corner of my eye as they boarded the elevator together. The doors closed, and I exhaled slowly. At 2:17 p.m., the elevator doors opened. 2 security personnel and Diane from HR walked directly to Lori's office. Through the glass walls, I watched as they waited. 10 minutes later, Lori returned alone. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see Lori's expression shift from confusion to disbelief to barely controlled anger. She shook her head repeatedly, pointed toward my desk once. Diane remained impassive, simply handing Lori a document which she refused to take. One security guard stepped forward, saying something that made Lori stiffen. She finally accepted the document, collected her purse from her desk drawer, and allowed herself to be escorted toward the elevator. As she passed my cubicle, our eyes met briefly. The hatred in her gaze could have burned through steel. 15 minutes later, Julian Reed, the company chairman, appeared from the executive elevator. He walked briskly through our department, nodding politely at startled employees, and proceeded directly to the conference room where the board was still meeting. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of hushed speculation. Ethan returned, looking shell-shocked, refusing to answer any questions. By 5 p.m., rumors had spread throughout the building, each version more dramatic than the last. I stayed late, finishing a client presentation, when Diane from HR appeared at my desk. "The chairman would like to see you," she said quietly. "Now, if possible." The executive floor was intimidating. All glass, steel, and success. I'd only been there twice before, both times to present findings to senior management, never to meet one-on-one with the chairman. Julian Reed's office was large but not ostentatious. He stood as I entered, extending his hand. "Miss Winters, thank you for staying late. Please, have a seat." I perched on the edge of a visitor's chair, hands folded in my lap to keep them from trembling. "I'll be direct," he said, sitting across from me. "We've reviewed the evidence you provided regarding Miss Barrett. Combined with other accounts that have since come forward, the situation is disturbing." I remained silent, unsure what response was expected. "You've been with us 6 years," he continued, glancing at what appeared to be my personnel file. "Your performance has been exemplary. Several clients have specifically requested you by name." He looked up. "Why didn't you come forward sooner about Miss Barrett's management practices?" The question caught me off guard. I documented what I could, but it was always subtle enough to be explained away. Taking credit for team achievements, blaming others for failures, those things happen in every workplace. Until she demanded payment for a promotion. "Yes," I agreed. That crossed a line I couldn't ignore. Julian nodded slowly. "We've terminated Miss Barrett's employment, effective immediately. The board has also decided to reassess the selection process for the department head position." My heart sank. Reassess meant delay. Delay meant possible reconsideration. "I understand, sir. The position announcement will be reposted tomorrow. I strongly encourage you to apply." He stood, signaling the end of our meeting. "The board values integrity, Miss Winters, perhaps even more than we value results." The following week was chaotic. With Lori gone and no department head, clients became anxious. I found myself unofficially managing several major accounts, working 14-hour days to maintain stability. Ethan avoided me entirely, while other colleagues seemed unsure how to react to the scandal. I submitted my application for the department head position, along with a detailed plan for departmental reorganization. Then, I waited, throwing myself into work to avoid dwelling on possibilities. 2 weeks after Lori's termination, I received an email requesting my presence at a board meeting the following day. My hands shook as I accepted the calendar invitation. That night, I barely slept. I rehearsed answers to potential questions, prepared counter-arguments to possible objections. By morning, I felt simultaneously exhausted and wired. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived at 9:45, dressed in my most professional outfit, carrying a portfolio with additional departmental analyses I'd prepared. The executive assistant smiled warmly as she showed me to the conference room. "They're ready for you," she said, opening the door. 7 board members sat around a large table, with Julian Reed at the head. They looked up as I entered, expressions unreadable. "Miss Winters?" Julian began after introductions had been made. "Thank you for your patience during this process. We've reviewed your application and spoken with several clients who work directly with you." I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. "Before we continue," he said, "I'd like to address something." He slid a folder across the table toward me. "These are statements from 3 junior analysts in your department. They describe how you personally mentored them when Miss Barrett refused to provide training. They also mention instances where you defended their work to clients when Miss Barrett attempted to place blame on them." I opened the folder with shaking hands, scanning the statements quickly. Clara, Mateo, and Tyler, 3 analysts I'd helped over the past year. I hadn't realized they'd noticed or appreciated the small interventions I'd made. "I didn't do anything special," I said finally. "They're talented analysts who just needed someone to believe in them." Julian smiled slightly. "That's precisely why we'd like to offer you the department head position, effective immediately." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The words hung in the air between us. "We'd like to offer you the department head position," as my brain struggled to process them. "Thank you." I finally managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm honored by your confidence in me." Julian nodded, then continued with details about salary, responsibilities, and transition timeline. I absorbed what I could, knowing I'd review everything more carefully later. The meeting concluded with handshakes and congratulations, and I somehow made it back to the elevator before my composure began to crack. I took the rest of the day off, my first personal day in over a year, and walked through the city for hours, letting reality sink in. By evening, I sat on my small balcony with a glass of wine, making notes about immediate priorities once I officially stepped into my new role. The following Monday, Julian personally introduced me to the department as their new head. I stood at the front of our largest meeting room, facing colleagues who, until that morning, had been my peers. Their reactions varied from genuine enthusiasm to barely concealed skepticism. Ethan sat in the back row, arms crossed tightly across his chest. I know this transition comes after a difficult period. I began once Julian had left. I want to assure everyone that my priority is creating a department where merit is recognized, collaboration is valued, and ethics are never compromised. The weeks that followed tested every skill I possessed. I restructured teams based on strengths rather than seniority. I implemented transparent evaluation processes. I established weekly meetings where anyone could raise concerns without fear of retaliation. Not everyone embraced the changes. Ethan became increasingly resistant, challenging decisions in meetings and undermining directives when he thought I wouldn't notice. Two senior analysts, who had been Lori's allies, requested transfers to different departments. I approved them immediately, wishing them well. Meanwhile, I promoted Clara, Mateo, and Tyler, the three analysts whose statements had supported my application. Their talents flourished with proper recognition, and client satisfaction scores steadily improved under their management. 1 month into my new position, Diane from HR requested a meeting. "We've completed our internal investigation of Lori Barrett's activities," she explained, closing her office door for privacy. "There's something you should know." She slid a folder across her desk. Inside was a list of names, 14 employees spanning 3 departments. Next to each name was an amount. "We believe these are individuals who paid her for various advantages," Diane said quietly. "Promotions, project assignments, favorable reviews. The amounts range from $5,000 to $20,000. I stared at the list, recognizing several names. "Have you spoken with these people?" "Not yet. Legal is still determining the best approach. Some may have felt coerced, as you were. Others may have been willing participants." I thought of the crushing weight I'd felt sitting across from Lori at Daisy's diner. How trapped I'd felt. How alone. "I'd like to be involved in those conversations," I said finally. "At least for the people in my department." Diane hesitated. "That's not standard protocol. I understand, but this isn't a standard situation." After consulting with legal, a compromise was reached. I wouldn't participate in the initial interviews, but affected employees from my department would be offered support afterward, including the option to speak with me confidentially. Over the next 2 weeks, 7 people from the list were called to HR. 5 returned to their desks, looking shell-shocked. 2 never returned at all. Trevor, a talented analyst who joined around the same time I had, knocked on my office door late one evening after his interview. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, voice rough with emotion. I invited him in, closing the door for privacy. "I paid her," he admitted without preamble, $12,000, 3 years ago, for the senior analyst position. He couldn't meet my eyes. I took out a loan, told myself it was just how things worked. The pain in his voice was palpable. "I'm not here to judge you, Trevor." "You should," he said bitterly. "I took the easy way. You refused." "There was nothing easy about what you did," I countered, "and I got lucky. My recording worked. The ethics committee believed me." Trevor finally looked up. "HR says I can keep my position, that I was a victim too. But how do I face everyone? How do I know if I actually deserve to be here?" This question, from this man whose technical skills I'd always respected, struck me deeply. How many talented people walked around carrying similar doubts, wondering if they belonged? "Your work speaks for itself," I told him. "I've seen your analyses, your client relationships. Nobody paid Lori to give you those skills." In the months that followed, our department slowly healed. We implemented anonymous, upward feedback channels. We created mentorship programs, pairing junior and senior analysts. We established clear criteria for advancement. The company's legal team worked with affected employees to recover money from Lori where possible. Some received partial reimbursements. Others chose to move forward without pursuing recovery, preferring to leave the entire situation behind. I heard nothing about Lori until nearly 8 months after her dismissal, when I received a LinkedIn notification that she had started a new position at a competing firm. My stomach dropped as I read the title, Director of Talent Development. That evening, I sat in my apartment, staring at her profile page, filled with congratulatory comments from new colleagues who had no idea what kind of person they'd just welcomed into their organization. The right thing, the ethical thing, would be to let it go. She'd lost her job. Her reputation at our company was destroyed. Justice, in some form, had been served. But what about her new colleagues? What about the employees who would soon report to her, vulnerable to the same manipulation she'd perfected? I closed my laptop without taking action, but the question lingered. 2 days later, I mentioned the situation to Julian during our monthly check-in. "She's at Grayson Financial now," I said casually, "leading talent development." Julian's expression revealed nothing. "That's unfortunate for them. Do we have any obligation to warn them?" He considered the question carefully. "Legally, no. Sharing details of her termination could expose us to liability." He studied me for a moment. "Does it bother you that she found another position so quickly?" "It bothers me that she's in a role where she can harm others." After our meeting, I tried to put Lori out of my mind. I focused on department improvements, on client relationships, on mentoring my team. But each time I approved a well-earned promotion or celebrated a team member's achievement, I thought of those 14 names in that HR folder, of other potential victims at her new company. 3 weeks later, I received an unusual email from a former client who had moved to Grayson Financial 6 months earlier. She wanted to meet for coffee, off-site, after hours. We met at a small cafe far from both our offices. Rachel looked nervous, glancing around repeatedly as we settled at a corner table. "I needed to ask you something," she began after ordering. "The new director of talent development at Grayson, Lori Barrett. She worked at your firm, right?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Rachel leaned forward, lowering her voice. "There are rumors about how she operates. She's implementing a new talent acceleration program with exclusive mentoring opportunities, but the selection criteria are incredibly vague." She hesitated. "Last week, she suggested I might be a perfect candidate for the program, but mentioned it would require a significant personal investment." My blood ran cold. 3 months into her new role, and Lori was already establishing the same predatory system. "What would you like me to do?" I asked carefully. "I need to know if I'm being paranoid. Is this normal practice?" "No," I said firmly. "It's not normal, and it's not acceptable." Rachel visibly relaxed. "That's what I thought, but she made it sound so routine, like this happens everywhere." She looked down at her coffee. "She mentioned she'd run a similar program at your company with great success. Said several people had advanced to leadership through it. The audacity was breathtaking, using her position at our company as a reference point, implying institutional approval of her extortion scheme. Rachel, would you be willing to document what she's told you? Not necessarily to take action now, but to have a record?" She agreed, and over the next 2 weeks, she kept detailed notes of every interaction with Lori. Meanwhile, I spoke confidentially with our legal department about my concerns. They were cautious but outlined what evidence would be needed if Rachel decided to report the situation internally at Grayson. I never suggested or encouraged Rachel to record conversations. That decision was entirely hers. But when she forwarded me an audio file 3 weeks later, I wasn't entirely surprised. Lori's voice was unmistakable. 15,000 guarantees your placement in the executive track. Consider it an investment in your future. Small price to pay for advancement. Really. The same phrases, the same predatory confidence, the same scheme. What happened next wasn't revenge. Not in the way I'd once fantasized about when lying awake after our confrontation at Daisy's diner. It was something quieter, more methodical, more complete. Rachel reported Lori to Grayson's compliance department, providing her documentation and recordings. I connected Rachel with our company's legal team, who shared, with careful legal parameters, information about the pattern of behavior that had led to Lori's termination. Grayson Financial launched an internal investigation. Within 3 weeks, they uncovered 5 employees who had already paid Lori for career acceleration. 2 others reported being approached but declining. Lori was terminated immediately. This time, the company pressed charges for fraud and extortion. The district attorney, presented with evidence from 2 separate companies showing an established pattern, pursued the case aggressively. I testified at her trial 6 months later, describing in detail the system she had created and how she had attempted to transplant it to her new employer. Other victims from both companies shared similar stories. Lori was convicted on multiple counts. The judge, noting the calculated nature of her actions and the abuse of professional trust, sentenced her to 4 years in prison and full restitution to all identified victims. But the most significant consequence wasn't the criminal penalty. It was the industry-wide conversation her case sparked about ethical leadership and power dynamics in corporate settings. 3 major financial firms implemented anonymous ethics reporting systems modeled after the one that had protected me. 2 industry publications ran feature articles on detecting and preventing similar schemes. The 14 names on that HR list, they all eventually came forward, freed from shame by the public exposure of Lori's methods. Most continued their careers, their confidence slowly rebuilding with proper support and recognition. As for me, I still run my department with transparency and integrity. I've implemented quarterly ethics refreshers and created clear, documented promotion paths so nobody ever feels their advancement depends on one person's whim. Sometimes I think about that day at Daisy's Diner, how close I came to either paying that bribe or walking away from my career, how a small decision to stand up for myself rippled outward, protecting dozens of others. The $10,000 I refused to pay, it became the first donation to a scholarship fund our company established for employees pursuing ethics certification in business leadership. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more real experiences that might help you navigate your own workplace challenges. Have you ever faced an ethical dilemma at work? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone else find the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it feels impossible.